Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to draw an autofocus background. So this is going to be a real-time video with real-time voiceover. So it's going to be a pretty long video, but I'm going to show you everything from the beginning until the end. So let's get started. And I'm going to start with the background, of course, and I'm going to start with the darker color. So I'm going to use this pastel stick from Schminke. It's a dark green, and I'm going to apply a very light base layer, minding the sketch of the French bulldog. I don't want to cover it, so I'm just going to apply a very light layer because the Schminke soft pastels are very pigmented, and I need to be very careful with the amount I apply so I don't overload the texture of the paper. So I'm just applying a base layer just to cover the background area, and later on I'm going to add more shades of gray to make the blurry background effect, but for now I just want to cover the area just to have an idea how large the background is going to be. So I'm just covering it up by using a very light pressure, and as you can see I'm just barely scraping the paper, and it's already so much pigment on the paper, but that's not a lot. It looks like a lot, but when I'm going to blend it out, it's going to look better. To be careful here because I'm going to use the small side of the soft pastel here because the area gets narrow. So I don't want to cover the sketch or go too much into the area of the French bulldog. So you can see I'm just following the sketch and trying to go around it, and then because I covered the area around the sketch, I don't worry anymore. So I'm just using the side of the soft pastel just to create a thin layer and cover a larger area faster, because if I will do this, it will take longer. So now I'm taking advantage of the fact that the soft pastel is wider, and I'm using the side without worrying too much. And now I'm going to pick up the soft tool. I'm going to use this one. It's a rectangle soft tool, and I use this one because so it's perfect for the background because I can cover a larger area faster. So I'm just going to push all of that pigment into the paper. And as you can see, because it's a thin layer, the sketch is still visible. So if I go a bit over it, it's no problem because I still can see it. See, it looks like so much pigment, but once I apply it to the paper, it all becomes lighter and thinner. That's because the texture of the paper is taking all of that pigment in, and it makes it look thinner. And as I said in the previous tutorial as well with the Dalmatian eye, this paper is very good at allowing a lot of layers, but with the background you need to be very careful not to apply more and more pigment. In the beginning I always made that mistake to apply too much pressure and too much pigment at once, and then after a few layers I realized that the pastel pigment was just moving around the page. So I was just moving it from one side to another one without really blending it or pushing it into the paper's texture. So I had a lot of pigment and the paper's texture was full. So of course, if the paper's texture is full, so you're just moving it from one side to the other side, which is frustrating, and it's not the purpose of using pastels. So since then I've learned to apply light layers and just build up the tones as I go without rushing and adding too much at once. So as you can see, the paper's texture is still visible, so that means I still have room for other layers. But I really like to start with the background, as I said, because it just gives me a better idea over the overall shapes of the subject. And I always offer a background to my commissions because I think they complement the drawing, and all the clients love a background. So I've never had a client who said they don't want a background, because I think it adds more value to the drawing and it makes the end result look more polished and completed. So that's why I also offer backgrounds. It's not a lot of extra work. It is extra work, but not a lot. It's just a few extra layers, but it's totally worth it in the long run, because once the drawing is done, I'm very happy that I created the background because it looks so much better. So that's it. I forgot to mention, this is a 9 with 12 inches commission, so 20 by 30 centimeter. So it's my smallest commission, and normally it shouldn't take me a long time because pastels are very fast, and I should be able to complete such a small drawing in short amount of time. But let's see. I don't want to hurry also. I want to do a good job for my client and also for you guys. I want to create a very realistic drawing and also to explain my steps. So as you can see, my soft tool starts to lose from the sponge. So the sponge is tearing off a bit, but that's okay. It always happens. So I'm blowing it away because I don't like to see it around. It's making the drawing look messy. And as I said in the previous video as well, sometimes with Clairefontaine pastel mat you can get a batch of bad papers, which is, I'm also a bit nervous when I start in the drawing because I never know how the quality of the paper is. Maybe I have a bad batch and I don't know, and I started drawing and then I realized I need to start over again because I really can't work with that paper. Because if the paper is bad, so if the batch is bad, you can't cover the whole area, and you see sometimes some very hard textures over the paper, which is impossible to cover because that's a defect of the manufacturing of the paper. So of course I have to start over again, but now by doing the background you can see that everything is soft and velvety. So that means that the quality of the paper is very good, which I'm happy because the sketch is a lot of work. I traced it, but still that's extra work and it requires a lot of attention to details and concentration. So I wouldn't like to start the sketch again. But if I would have to, of course I would do it because there's no other solution. But I'm very glad that this paper is good. So I need to be mindful of the areas around the subject and the background, because sometimes I'm afraid to go too close to the sketch and I leave these sides around the sketch sometimes without any pigment on them, and it looks like it has an aura sometimes. So since I made that mistake once and I realized after finishing the drawing that the dog looked like it had an aura around it, since then I always make sure to go as much as possible around the sketch and cover that area also, without being afraid of covering the sketch, because I've learned my lesson and I realized that it's not a big problem if I go a bit over the sketch, because I still can be visible. But of course, the more layers you apply, the more dangerous it becomes to cover the sketch, because you apply more pigment, the texture of the paper gets fuller, and also you have a bigger chance of covering the sketch. But of course, by then the base layer is done of the background, and I know where to stop with the pigment. And in the worst case, if I do go over the sketch a bit, I can fix that when I'm working on the French Bulldog, on Kiko. So not worrying about that yet. I think the first base layer was good. It's even everywhere. That's what I wanted. The sketch is visible. Here I need to rework it a bit. And now I'm going to start applying more variations of green. So now that the base layer is done, I'm going to move on to adding some more colors. And I'm going to start adding some bright greens where I see it in the reference picture. And I see a bit of it here. It doesn't have to be perfectly like in the reference picture, because we're not a copy machine, so I'm trying to get as close as possible to the reference picture, but I don't want to copy it exactly, so my client also doesn't expect me to make it 100% like in the reference picture. As long as the drawing is going to look like their dog, they're going to be very happy with the result, so I'm not worrying about that too much. And maybe I see a bit more here, just marking where the bright green areas are going to be placed. I also see a lot of this color around here. Actually, it's everywhere, so I think I might have to add it everywhere and then just blend it out. Because I can see that this color, the base layer of the background, is a bit too grayish and I need a more vibrant green, so I'm going to use this color. And in the reference picture, it stopped all the way here, but because I wanted, my paper is too large for the reference picture, I made it a bit longer, so it went somewhere here, and also here. I'm just going to add it everywhere. It's okay if I cover the whole area with this color, because I still have enough tooth left in the paper texture, so I'm not worrying that I'm going to fill it up and not going to be able to add some more layers later on, so I'm just working lightly here. And again, blending all that color in, and you can see how the background gets instantly brighter. It gets more vibrant. It combines with the base layer, and I still can achieve a very nice shade of green. So I'm trying to work around those vibrant circles I just made, and I'm going to blend them out a bit later on after I finish this base layer. And again, you can see the sketch still sees the sketch, so that's a good sign. That means the paper's texture isn't full yet, so that's how I also base myself on when to know if the texture of the paper is almost full or not. If you still can see the sketch through the layers, that means that you still have a lot of pigment of texture in the paper to fill up. But if you don't see it anymore when you apply the layers, that means that the texture has been filled up. So then you need to be mindful of the last layers you apply. So that's also a very important tip when, of course, if you are sketching your outline from scratch, this tip doesn't apply, because you're going to have a different effect of the pastel on the sketch. But now, in my case, that's the reason why you can still see it, because I still have enough layers, enough texture in the paper's tooth. Also, a very good tip about the sketch is to, if you want to trace it like me, or sketch it, you can use a graphite pencil because pastel can't cover up the graphite pencil, so you're going to get a similar effect like me. You're going to be able to see the sketch through the layers because, as I said, pastels glide over the graphite, so it's hard to cover graphite. That's why everyone is using graphite when they work with pastels to create a sketch. I also tried it and it works. But I prefer tracing now because it saves me so much work and time. So now I'm going to just lightly smudge these areas. They're gonna fade away, of course. I was expecting that, but at least I know where I'm going to add the bright green layers later on. So with pastel is normal when you apply the pastel stick on the paper, it looks so vibrant and colorful. But when you push it into the paper's texture, it's fading away. That's because you are spreading that strong pigment everywhere, and of course, the pigment gets less strong, so that's why you can see that it fades away into the layers. But this is just the base colors of the background, so that's exactly what I want to happen. I want everything not to be too strong or defined because it's too early to add a lot of details in the background and bright colors, so that's okay for me. I don't mind that the colors are going away. And I can see that here on the side it's a bit darker, so I'm going to use this darker green. I can see that it goes like everywhere and all the way down. This is a Schminke pastel stick, so I need to be very careful with how much pigment I apply because it's very pigmented. The one I used, this one is a Rembrandt soft pastel, the one I recommend also as an alternative for more expensive pastels, soft pastels, and that's a bit less pigmented, so you can apply more pressure, but you're not going to apply as much pigment as with this one because it's better quality and it's packed with pigment. So I need to keep that in mind when I use them. And I see here also a bit, just trying to keep those blurred details on the background separate. So I'm just trying to put some pigment around them. And here, just a bit here and there, not just playing around with the pastel stick. I don't want to follow the reference picture too much now this moment because I still need to add a lot of layers and it does have to be perfect from the start. So I'm going to pick up again. You can use this one, the soft tool, as many times as you want, but for the background it's okay. I don't have to clean it very often because it's similar colors, but if I would have worked on the base layers and I would have to switch to different colors, I would have to clean the sponge of the soft tool with on a microfiber cloth because I don't want to drag all of those colors into the brighter ones or the bright colors into the dark ones and muddy them up. So that's why I need to be very careful and clean my sponge very often. And here just lightly pressing just to mix those two greens. And here just some random patches of this type of green. Just moving my brush randomly everywhere because I'm going to adjust it a bit later on. And here I see a highlight of a grayish blue highlight. So I need to keep that in mind and just work around it. I did add quite a bit of pigment with this color, I can tell, because I feel the paper's texture filling up very fast, but that's fine because I think I have to add 2 or 3 layers maximum, so that should be fine. But now I'm going to pick up a neutral glove. So I'm going to use this glove to avoid pushing the sebum, the oils of the skin, to the texture of the paper and to make the pastels fade away, because the pigment in contact with the oils of the skin tends to fade away and you lose a lot of the vibrancy of the pastels. So by using this glove, I create a barrier between the oils of my fingers and the pastel pigment, so they stay intact. You can use also latex gloves, but I find this work a bit better, and they're also thinner than the latex gloves. And yeah, in the summer, especially if you're working and you wear gloves, the hand can get very warm and sweaty. So these gloves are a bit less thick, which makes it a bit less warm for the fingers. But I'm just using these gloves just to push the pigment a bit deeper into the paper texture. It's safer this way, and also it's faster because the fingers are a larger blending tool, the cheapest blending tool you have, so I can just work faster in all those areas. Also the drawing is quite small, so that also helps. I'm going now to add some more of those vibrant colors. Here maybe. As you can see, it already starts to look like a blurry background. Also see a lot of this here, but that's darker, so I have to apply a bit later the other kind of green to make it a bit darker. And here again, just between those dark areas that I created earlier, I'm going to add some lighter areas just to create that nice blurry effect. And as I said, I need to use this kind of green to make these areas a bit darker. I'm just going to apply it everywhere again, mostly over the lighter areas. And I'm going to use also a bit of blue, because I noticed that these highlights here are a bit blue and gray, like grayish blue. I'm going to here also to edit now, so I don't have to edit later on. And these highlights here are a bit brighter, so I'm just going to add a touch of white, not too much, because it's a Schmink soft pastel stick and it's very pigmented. Maybe here also. And now I'm going to use my fingers to blend this, because If you work on the base layers, it's better to use this for the initial layers, because with the fingers it's harder to push those layers into the paper's texture when the texture is still not filled up. But when it's filled up with 2-3 layers, it's much easier to use your fingers to push that pigment into the paper and also combine it with the other areas, because it glides slowly over the paper and also it combines easier with the other ones. But I think I still have to use an eyeshadow sponge or something just to push it a bit more into the paper's texture, like this, and just then use my finger to make it a bit smoother. Do have to add some white here also. Yes, that's it, it looks good. Maybe a bit more blue later on, but for now just going to leave it like this. And also here, just go over those areas fast. Hopefully now it should be easier to blend. I do have to apply a very hard pressure, and I hope my table is not going to move the whole time. It seems like I don't have enough layers to push the pigment with my fingers, so I'm going to have to turn this around and use the other side, the clean side, to push these areas a bit more into the paper's texture. And now it looks better. It's faster than with the fingers because the sponge has a different texture than the natural glove, and it's reacting faster on the paper with pastels than with my fingers. So I think I need to use this a few more layers and then try again to use my finger. As I said, I'm just pushing those layers into the paper's texture, trying to get rid of all the pigment. So getting rid of all these lines made with the pastel stick. To be very careful here because it's such a bright highlight. I don't want to make it too dark. And now just work those areas a bit more. And maybe some more blue here. Some blue, a touch of green, and also a touch of white. And here also. I can try again using my finger. Still not good enough, so I'm just going to keep using the sponge from the soft tool. And a very good trick to achieve this blurry dots from the background, you just press hard in the middle, and while you get closer to the outside of the round circle, you barely touch the paper, so you can create this nice effect. So push a bit harder and then towards the outside, barely touch it, and then you have those background blurry effects. Here the same. You can see how much value it adds to the drawing It makes it look so much different and more interesting. If I would leave the background like this color, it will still be nice, but it wouldn't add any value to the drawing. So that's why I prefer to create an interesting background also, just to make the whole drawing look more interesting. Now I'm going to try to use my fingers to make that a bit softer. And here just applying a very light pressure because I want to carefully mix all of those colors together. And now maybe use my finger. I still need to use the soft tool. The layers are not thick enough. So I see that I lost a bit of that blue color, so I'm just going to add a bit more of it. And maybe some of the gray also. I see also one here. And now I'm going to carefully combine all of those together. So now I see that I can use my finger finally to blend it all together. I still have to add a bit of blue because it looks too green. So I'm going to add a bit, I'm going to pick up a lighter blue from my set because I think this is too dark. I need something lighter. So I just picked this one, which is a lighter blue. I'm going to apply a very thin layer. Yeah, that looks better. And now I'm going to use my finger just to combine all of those layers together. Now I'm going to use some black to add some depth to some areas, but I'm not going to overdo it because a black color can make the background look too flat. I just want to add a bit of contrast here and there because I also see in the reference picture that some areas also have black in them. So I'm trying to achieve that. So I'm going to pick up my black soft pastel and just add some pigment here and there. I see here a very dark patch, so I'm going to add a bit more. In this area here it's very dark, so I need to also here, so I need to add a bit more. So a very good trick to apply less pigment is to turn the soft pastel on the side and use the white area to apply pigment. As you can see here, this line is loaded with pigment much more than this Then this layer here, which is done with the side of the soft pastel, so that's a good trick. Just put it on the side to apply less pigment. So I'm going to use a dark green soft pastel and just add it over the black pigment just to make the dark green a bit darker. I'm also going to apply it where I see a darker area also. Here. Maybe some more black in these areas also. And now I'm going to try to blend using my finger, but first I'm going to clean the nitrile glove on this piece of microfiber cloth and just try to gently push that pigment into the paper. So I think I need to use this one again and just make circular motions to push it and mix it with other layers. As you can see, I get a combination between green and black, so somewhere a darker green. So a darker green. I don't want this area to be entirely black. I still want to keep it green, so that I'm very careful with the amount of black that I apply. And also on this smaller area, just break that pigment a bit so I can push it into the paper's texture with my fingers later on. And here also. Now I'm going to try to push it into the paper's texture with my finger. And you can see it works because with my soft tool I broke apart that pigment. So now it was just laying on the paper, and now with my finger I'm just pushing all of that pigment. Oh wait, here I think a piece of the black soft pastel fell down, so I just moved it around. Okay, so I was saying that here also to fix that fast, just fast by applying some pigment and then using the clean part of the soft tool, the bottom part, just to push that light green into the paper without smudging the area. So what I was saying is that with the soft tool I broke down the pigment on the paper, and now it was just lying there, and with my finger I'm just pushing all of that pigment that's laying around into the paper's texture. And creating a smooth layer. Trying to mine those lighter areas, not to go too much into that area with my finger because I want to keep it as it is. I do think I need to get rid of more of the pigment here because I can still see the lines from the soft pastels. And I guess that's a sign that I didn't push hard enough with my soft tool onto the paper. But I'm going to fix that now. Maybe here also a bit move it around, just to make a nicer transition between those colors. And I think it's better now. I can still see the lines a bit, and probably I need to go back later on to mix a bit more with the soft tool, but for now just going to try to push the pigment that is on the paper at this moment. I'm just adding, taking, adding, taking. That's the purpose of creating a base layer or even a background. You keep adding things and taking things from the area. That's also why I like pastels so much. They are so forgiving and they allow you to change the darkness of the colors and to remove them if they aren't correct and add new layers. So that's one good thing about pastels, and that's why I changed it. That's why I moved from color pencils to pastels, because I tried them and I saw how forgiving they are, and I really wanted to learn more about them. So now here I am 2 years later making tutorials about pastels, so you never know what's coming on you in life, right? So I'm going to try on the lighter areas to make them a bit more defined. So I'm going to work a bit on the bluish grayish area here, trying to be mindful of the sketch also. And I see also here one. And now with this lighter green, I'm going to work on those areas. And here. And here a bit lighter here, and I'm going to use this one again, the medium green color, just to make some areas a bit darker. Maybe also in this dark area just add some soft transitions between the light areas and the dark ones, because I don't want this area to be completely dark. I want to have a variety of tones there. So I'm going to clean my fingers again to make sure they don't transfer the pigment where I don't want. And I need to use the soft tool again. Let me try with the eyeshadow sponge to see how it works. What was great actually, because it is a small area and the eyeshadow has a small tip. This is ideal for this area of the drawing. So I'm just making those light areas of the background a bit more prominent and slowly pushing them into the background area. So I'm going to try to push them into the darker area, but make it look like it's fading away. So I'm trying to work around it. This. And here also I need to add a bit more here around. I want to create those circles in the background to make it look like it's autofocus. A bit of the finger to make everything smoother. Here also. And here I'm going to use my finger directly because I can see that I have enough pastel pigment onto the paper, so it's going to blend pretty good by using my finger. This. I'm going to clean the brush, the eyeshadow sponge, and just work on these areas. And maybe because I have some of that pigment on my eyeshadow sponge, I'm going to drag it also on these areas here. Going to try to use my finger now before I clean it to push that pigment into the paper and make it a bit softer around the edges. This here also. And I'm going to use again maybe another eyeshadow sponge because that one is loaded with pigment. I'm going to use this one. It has a bit of pigment on it, but it's almost nothing, so it's not going to transfer. And I'm going to work on these areas and just push that pigment into the paper's texture to create some brighter areas in the background. Here also. And let's not forget about these spots here. I also need to get rid of them because they're just laying there around. I need to use a bit the soft tool to get rid of that pigment faster. So now I'm going to push it into the paper's texture because I use my soft tool just to make it a bit, to spread the pigment a bit more. Like this. And also by using the smallest finger, I'm going to work on this area because it's a small area and I need a small tool for it, so I'm just going to use my pinky finger. I still see some pigment, so I'm going to break that down a bit more. And try to work around it a bit also. And now going back with the finger and trying to make that edge a bit blurry. That looks good, and this area is also a bit blurry. And maybe add a bit more darkness, so I'm going to maybe look for even darker green in my set. I'm going to choose a very dark green pencil. I found this one, so I'm going to try to see how it works, but I think it's the same like the other one, so I'm going to use the darker one. So I'm going to use some more black again just to make those darker areas a bit more polished. Just being very mindful again with the amount of pastel using the side. Also I see here also a bit. And using this small eyeshadow sponge to push that pigment into the paper's texture. And we always have to use circular motions because we want the pigment to be spread evenly over the surface of the paper. And it also works if you move the blending tool up and down, but I don't know, I feel like if you use a circular motion, the result is much better and the pigment is spread more evenly over the surface than if you do a back and forth motion. Okay, now let's see if I can use my finger finally. It looks like it's working, so I need to insist a bit with my pressure. Being very mindful of those light areas. And it looks like it's still not enough pigment on the paper because I can feel that I can't really mix it very well. So I think I need to add a few more layers. I'm going to do this now with my light green again. The blue one, I also see a few blue details here in the background. Maybe a bit here also. I'm going to clean the soft tool and very carefully and just lightly by using a circular motion creating some circular movements. Cleaning it when I move to the next area because I don't want to transfer the pigment. And here also. It starts to look a bit like it has a blurry effect, so I'm happy with that. I do still think I need to add a bit more colors here because it looks a bit too flat. I don't like that, so I'm going to just create some subtle details here. Also here on this side. And I think I need to work also a bit more on the darker areas because it looks a bit messy. And I didn't reach the contrast I wanted yet. And the transitions between the blurry spots and the dark areas isn't as quite as smooth as I want, so I need to work a bit on that more. Like this. Maybe a bit more here to add some nice gradient towards the lighter area. And now just pushing all of that into the paper's texture and combining it with this medium gray patch of pastel here. And here also. A bit more because the pigment still stays on the surface of the paper, so I need to apply a bit more pressure like this. And now, as I said, I need to work a bit on the outer parts of the blurry details just to make them combine with the other areas. It takes a lot of patience because I don't have to hurry the process and muddy the colors or make them too dark. I need to be very patient. And I'm going to add a bit more pigment here and here. This, and this are the only four brightest greens on the reference picture. And again, very carefully filling in the tooth of the paper. And the small ones also. A bit more because I still see that pigment on the paper. and here also. Just moving around and get rid of more of that pigment that I see that's laying on the paper. Going with some black, just a bit in some areas, just barely touching the paper. I don't want to ruin that nice blurry effect I achieved around the lighter areas. I just want to add a bit more depth. This, and smudging it around. As you can see here, the sketch is a bit lost, but I'm not worrying too much because I'm going to show you how you can bring it back to attention. How can you bring it back under this layer of pastel? And it's similar with the technique I used for the Dalmatian eye in the previous video, by using a clean eyeshadow sponge just to remove all of that pigment and reveal the sketch. Trying to make those areas a bit darker. And also going a bit into the lighter areas with the dark pigment to make a nice gradient. Here I need a bit more pressure. Here also. It does take longer to blend with the finger than with the soft tool. So I'm trying to use a combination of two. The soft tool only to move the pigment around the paper a bit faster, and the finger to push that pigment into the paper's texture. So those two tools work together, the soft tool to spread the pigment and the finger to blend and push all of that pigment into the paper's texture. And as you can see here, if I use my finger, nothing happens, but if I use the soft tool first and then my finger, you can see that it looks much smoother. And it is also faster to blend. Here also, so I think I have to go a bit more everywhere and just make that pigment soft. It's really difficult for me to talk and film at the same time because I'm so focused on what I'm doing. I'm also thinking in the back of my mind, what should I say and what should I work on now? But it's so difficult sometimes to remember also to talk while drawing, because I've been doing this only for 2 weeks, I think. I've been filming my tutorials for 2 weeks now. And before that, I was always used to listen to music and draw alone. Just listen to music or podcasts without thinking over the process of the drawing. So now I need to learn this whole new skill of talking and explaining in the same time. and also giving good advice, not just talking about myself, just giving advice about what I'm doing. So that's why sometimes you don't hear me talking, is because I focus so much. I go in my alone drawing mode with the headphones on, and then I realize that I'm actually filming and I should talk. I really like telling you what I'm doing and helping you learn from me. I'm going to use a small finger here to make that disappear, and here I see some more pigment. And a bit more color here and there, just to make those lighter details stand out more. Going to add some extra like blue grayish areas to make the background just a bit more interesting, but not too much, not to overwork it, because you can also add a lot too much pigment and make the background look too busy, so I'm trying to avoid that. Cleaning my eyeshadow sponge very well and going in, and this time trying, because the paper is loaded with pigment, the pastel is going to react faster to my eyeshadow sponge, so I need to be very careful with the pressure not to lose all of that pigment, because I want to make those areas lighter. So for that I need a very light pressure to make sure that vibrant pigment of the pastel stands out. Like this, looks bright, that's what I wanted. And I'm just working in the middle of that area without going too much on the outside of it. So I just want that middle of the circle to be brighter than the other one, just to bring the attention in the middle. And here also, just very careful. And now here also, I live next to a nursery, so if you hear a baby crying in the video, I hope not, but in case you hear it, I want you to know that's not my baby, it's just the baby from the nursery that don't want to sleep. So yeah, I really hope you don't hear it, but just in case. I do hear it a lot, so I'm used to it, but now I just realized that it's possible you're going to hear it also in the recording, and I don't want that. But I can't take out every sound possible, so sometimes I do have to leave the sounds in and hoping you're not going to hear it because I also blend a lot with my fingers and the blending tools, and that also makes a lot of scratchy sounds, and hopefully that's going to cover up all the other external sounds. Going to try to work a bit more around. I feel like I'm starting to overwork it, so I need to slow down a bit because I feel like I'm trying to finish the background as fast as possible, but I don't want to hurry my process. I'm just trying now to make the transitions a bit smoother because I feel like they are a bit too rough now, and I don't want that. I'm just trying to get rid of those hard edges. And maybe around this also. Here, just going everywhere a bit and making that a bit smoother. So as I said, I'm going to refine those areas a bit more. Just trying to mix everything together a bit without muddying the colors or making the areas darker or lighter. Just trying to smoothen everything out. Maybe I do have though to add a bit, because I really think I don't have a lot of contrast still, but this is going to be the last step I'm doing, because I feel that the texture of the paper starts to fill up quickly, and I think it's time for me to stop with the background. But before that, I want to make sure that I have enough contrast in the background. So I'm going to just add a bit more black. Like this. It already starts to look much better. I applied more pressure with the soft pastel intentionally to add more pigment and make that black more pigmented. So I did it on purpose. That's why it's so pigmented and dark. And now let's try to move that pigment around. This is some extra work, but I really want to add depth to the background, and before I finish it, to be pleased with how it looks, because I don't want to go back working on the background once I finish working on the French Bulldog because that's going to be too risky. I don't want that. Prefer to finish the background first and then, without stressing about it anymore, move on to the French Bulldog. So I'm trying, because I'm busy now with the background, I need to do everything I can at this stage of the drawing. And here also down. It does look a bit better now, a bit more contrast and dimension to the background, which I wanted to achieve. And I'm pressing really hard. It's like a workout, to be honest. I really have to push all of that pigment into the paper evenly. I don't think I have to go to the gym today anymore because this is a complete workout. Oh. You don't want to know how hard my table is moving around because of all that pressure, but hopefully you can see it on the camera. Okay, so I think the background is done. And next, I'm going to, before I move on to the base layers, I'm going to show you how can I bring back the sketch that I covered with the soft pastel. So I brought out some clean sponges and I'm going to use a very clean eyeshadow sponge and just take away that pigment that I added over the sketch. You can see how the sketch is visible again. I need to be very careful though not to erase too much from the background layers because it's more difficult to fix that now that all the colors are in place and the background is finished. So I'm trying to not go as much into the background as possible. So I'm trying to be very mindful where the sketch is visible and stop there. Also follow the reference picture to follow the shapes of the outline to make sure that I don't just imagine a sketch, that I really follow the sketch and the proportion of the dog. For example, if I wouldn't follow the reference picture and I don't see the sketch, I would go more and more towards the background and make the ear look huge, but looking at the reference picture and comparing the sizes of the reference picture and the drawing, even if I don't see the sketch, I know where to stop because I have the reference in front of me. As I can see already here, I went too much into the background, and now I'm going to use an eyeshadow sponge that I used already for the background and try to fix that by adding some green, because I already have some green pigment onto this eyeshadow sponge from the background. I'm trying now to cover that up. And I here to go a bit more here. I'm going to fix that later on when I'm creating the ear, but for now just want to make sure that I see the sketch. I see that here I went a lot into the background, into the sketch, so I need to really remove a lot of the pigment. To clean it from time to time so I can pick up more pigment. I think that looks right. I'm going to move down here. Just follow the reference picture again. I think I need to move to the other side of the eyeshadow sponge because the previous side is full of pigment, so it doesn't pick up anything anymore. I'm just using the other side. That's why they are so handy, because they have two sides, so you can switch between them whenever you want. And here also to move to another one. I'm going to refine those areas when I'm working on them, but I really want to make sure that the proportions are right before I start adding the base layers. Now it's like painting in reverse. Instead of adding color, I'm taking out color. So it is like the undo option of the keyboard on the laptop, but only in drawing version. So I see that here and here I went a bit too much into the background. That's okay. I'm going to fix it fast by adding just a bit of pigment and using an older eyeshadow sponge from the background and just blend all of that out lightly without even applying too much pressure. And see how fast I fixed it only by applying just a bit of pigment. And now I'm going to pick out a bit more pigment. Like this, and going all the way down. I see it now. I was like, where is the sketch? Didn't see it, but suddenly it appeared. So I see the sketch now, but here I still don't see it, so I think I need to go a bit more. I start to see it now. I think I had too much pigment onto the eyeshadow sponge and it wasn't picking up anything, but now I see it. Maybe refine this here a bit because I went too much into the background. Just mixing the pigment I already have here, mixing it with the one I removed, just pulling it into the area where I removed the pigment to make it look like it's part of the background. Just like this. Now blending it out. And I'm going to use the other side here just to make it a bit lighter here. I need a new one because those are full of pigment. Just to make a new one here. Like this. And maybe before I wrap this up, I'm just going to add some very subtle highlights in some of the areas because I don't want to leave it like this, just on those areas. And I'm going to pick up a clean eyeshadow sponge and just apply very light circular motion just to make that middle of the circle a bit lighter. Like this, it already looks better. But because I have so much pigment in this area, it eats up that white pigment pretty fast, so I think I need to apply a bit more. Yes, that looks better. I think that looks much better, but I need to make it a bit wider. Okay, now I'm gonna stop because I'm gonna overwork it. And if you want to see the other parts of this dog pastel portrait on my Patreon, you can find the link in the description or the first comment. There I worked on the rest of the dog, so base layers, details and final details, also in real time with real-time voiceover. So if you are interested in that, you can check out my Patreon. I'd love to see you there also. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.